It's an absolute privilege and an honor to have the luxury of sharing the screen with Mr. Umair Khan, who I believe for the Pakistani tech and startup ecosystem really doesn't need much introduction. There's so many interesting facets to his entrepreneurial journey that I feel the hour might not suffice today. In addition to being the founding member for the Mentors Fund, which has a very impressive portfolio of investments in the Pakistani tech ecosystem, including Abhi, Dawaai, KTrade, and Sehat Kahani, to name a few. He also is the CEO and the founder at Folio 3, another
The
big
chairman, the executive chairman,
chairman,
along with my partner, Adnan Lawai, who's the CEO.
the executive chairman at Folio 3, which again is an impressive name in the Pakistani tech ecosystem that doesn't need much introduction. And for the Bay Area-based foodies in us, he also has, that co-founding sort of contribution into the Zareen restaurant, one of the very few Michelin star rated Pakistani restaurants around the world. So I almost feel like he's sort of lived the entrepreneurial journey, which many of us have, sort of thought about or fantasized about in different phases of our life journeys. So without further ado, I think I'd like to kick it off in a sort of traditional fashion, Mr. Umair. The sort of inception story, the life story, like Karachi to MIT to Intel to the entrepreneurial world. I think for those of us around this virtual table, we'd love to know how you sort of charted your course through this impressive entrepreneurial journey that you've lived.
Yeah, Ali, thank you so much for those very kind words and very, very generous introduction. Hello and Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Great to be part of this community and this current conversation. Big thanks to my friend Ali Fahad for honestly putting all of this together over the years and making it what Park Launch is. Yeah, so my story obviously starts as all great stories do in Karachi, and my first job was as a high school teacher. So I was a maths teacher in the city school Karachi Hali Road branch. So I'd done my Habib Public and grammar stint, and I was 17 teaching 15-year-olds. Best job of my life. I think some of you know about this. I just absolutely loved it, and honestly, a 17-year-old getting 15, 16-year-old fairly rowdy kids to listen to you for about a year and persuade them to do the right thing by themselves was an amazing time. But I think it was a great learning experience, and I still consider myself first and foremost a teacher, and then maybe an entrepreneur or investor after that. And some 30 years later, I'm in front of kids again at UC Berkeley. I teach entrepreneurship there in the College of Letters and Science. So after my stint as a teacher, I went to college there in the Boston area. Again, learned a lot, had a great time, and then came out in the middle of the dot-com boom, or just before the dot-com boom. Worked at Intel, started out on my own, as everybody was in the late 90s. You didn't get any extra credit for either fundraising or starting a startup. Everybody was doing it. But what was interesting was the dot-com boom, as most of these booms are, was followed pretty quickly by the dot-com bust. And you learn much more in sort of tough, troubling times about yourself, about your team, and about the entrepreneurial journey. So that was a very harrowing but incredible experience. Circa 2000, 2001, my first startup, Clickmarks, was doing. At the time when nobody was doing revenues or profit, we were doing profitable revenue of $1 million a quarter. And then I would say, a year later, we were doing $3 million a quarter in expenses and losses and $0 in revenue. So that was interesting. And that's what happens when, sort of VC sometimes bring in seasoned management. But then we had to kind of dig ourselves out of that hole. And one of the, things I did, which in retrospect just helped a lot. I and my team decided that we needed to have an offshore center, some resources, just to right our financial ship. And that's when we started with about 8 or 10 young kids on Shara Faisal, Karachi. And that was my first foray into the world of distributed resources and really the origin story of Folio 3. Because that group of about 10, 12 folks really helped me get our act together here with our startup. And so once Clickmarks was acquired, I and my friend Adnan Dawaai, who I met in college, we started Folio 3. And over the last 17 years, it's gone from strength to strength and helps all other entrepreneurs, just like originally I as an entrepreneur was helped and served by resources in Pakistan. So that was kind of the next phase of my journey with Folio 3, which still continues, which is great. And then other ventures happened. Obviously, the Mentis Fund was an idea I had about 6 years ago, and the whole concept was that folks like me who don't want to be full-time investors, we are actually having a lot of fun being operators. If we could give a little bit of our time and a little bit of our mind share, a little bit of our capital, and all our hard-earned lessons and all the stupid mistakes forward to other startups and other entrepreneurs, it'd be great. So that was the concept of Mentis Fund, which is an early stage VC. And we've done actually now close to about 100 investments between the first and second fund, focus mostly here in the US because we're based here and we know the market, but we've done some very, very good investments and found some fantastic entrepreneurs in Pakistan. Our investment thesis, it's interesting because we had lots of initial thesis about stuff. Like one of the big thesis was that we don't invest in hardware companies. Our first investment was Railware, which is a hardware company. So then we're like, maybe we should just go easy on the thesis. And the fundamental thesis is we're looking for really, really great entrepreneurs and great teams. Because ultimately it comes down to people. You can have all manners of, great ideas and all, but the execution and the pivots and all happen because of people. So we bet on entrepreneurs that are transforming traditional industries. So we love actually healthcare side, we like transportation, we like other traditional industries that are being transformed by entrepreneurs. So that sort of was the next point or the next expansion of my journey through Mentis Fund. And then of course there's the UC Berkeley angle, which again about 5 years back I started. I wanted to be back teaching. I wanted to be back in front of college campuses. So that's where that started. It's been, it's been amazing to see kind of the next generation. And then you mentioned, Ali, that, quite possibly, in fact, not impossibly, certainly my best investment entrepreneurially and matrimonially is Zareen and Zareen's restaurant. That's been, sort of Michelin guide, lines out of the door, 3 restaurants, big cult following in and around Stanford and the Silicon Valley community. So it's been amazing. And I'm working on a cookbook right now with Zareen to be published by Penguin Random House. The Zareen's cookbook, Recipes from a Well-Fed Childhood. So it's nostalgia, it's food, it's our life in Karachi and Pakistan growing up. So lots of interesting projects all around. But in summary, at Folio 3, we work with entrepreneurs to build their stuff. At Mentis Fund, we invest in entrepreneurs. At Berkeley, I teach entrepreneurs, and at Zareen's, I feed entrepreneurs. So that's a bit about me.
No, that is really, really inspiring and really impressive, obviously, to say the least. I think we've started receiving questions. So just sort of shifting focus from the Valley to Pakistan and the sort of broader MENA region. How do you sort of think about sort of macro and geopolitical risk? Obviously, your investments are on a longer time horizon, but at some level, you are factoring in medium-term risk related to geopolitics and the macroeconomic cycle. So talk us through a bit of that, if you can, please.
Yeah, so it's a simple risk-reward equation, right? So if you invest in a company in the Valley, usually the valuations will be very high if it's a repeat entrepreneur, right? And so that low risk is baked into the valuation, right? So something that we think might be worth, whatever, 8 million pre-money or 6 million cap or whatever, may go, especially in the good times, for 15, 20, 30 million, right, at seed or whatever it is, right? And so therefore, right, the reward, maybe not that easily be 20, 30x, it might be 5x for us or whatever, right? In another case, like if you go to the Middle East or if you go to Pakistan, the risk is higher, right? So certainly there's the geopolitics, there's economy, there's, rupee dollar ratio and all that fun stuff, right?
Yeah.
So again, if that's factored in to the valuation, right? So if you get a really good team and you get a fair valuation, then it is some serious potential. It's of interest to us, right? The issue, of course, happens in circa 2021 when everybody's going crazy, right, and ignoring risks all over the world, but certainly in Pakistan. And then you're paying 50 million, 80 million, 100 million sort of price tag, and so you're not really factoring the risk in, right? So as investors, you just have to be careful of that. As long as the risk reward makes sense, I think it's perfectly fine. I think our side is, of course, that most of us, so we are over 50 partners, right? So I've set this up as a community. It's not an angel group, it's a venture fund. So there's an operating committee, there's an investment committee, and all of that stuff. But our partners are mostly in the US, there's some in the UK, there's some in Middle East and Pakistan, but the majority are here. So, you want to be, you should be investing in markets that you really understand and are close to the action on, right? So that's why our focus is obviously here. But for other venture players, and I'm very heartened, honestly, by the rise of the venture community in Pakistan, right? Because back in 2007, 2008, I had this whole idea of actually trying to set up, and help get kind of venture money into Pakistan, right? Because there's a lot of VC money flowing into China, into parts of the Middle East, into India, and then there was this black hole in the middle, Pakistan and some other countries around. So I felt that was very underserved. But it was hard at that time, right? Most of the folks at that time investing had much more of a SATE mentality. It wasn't a proper VC and all. And now it's actually quite amazing to see that there are at least 5 to 7 really good venture funds, and we know them all, and we know the principals there, and work closely with them and have a respect for them, right? And I see that their job, is tough in some ways because they're navigating all these, this volatility. But that's true of any VC anywhere. So if you can get a fair valuation, you focus on the entrepreneurs, don't sort of bleed them dry and do kind of the SATE type stuff, right? Do proper VC, right? I think there are some very, very good rewards to be had.
In the emerging markets context and in Pakistan specifically, do you have a specific sector focus? Do you typically prefer consumer sector investments?
So no, I think we are very boring B2B SaaS folks. I guess we've done sort of B2B2C, but the consumer side, it's tough, right? I mean, we have obviously deals in and around consumer. I think, Bookme has done exceptionally well. There are others that have gone sort of from B2C, like Sehat Kahani, to more B2B. Our focus is much more. The stuff that we understand is B2B software, B2B SaaS. So that's kind of our focus. I think consumer can do exceptionally well. It can feel a little bit more like a truly hits-driven business. All of venture is hits-driven, but hits-driven almost in the sense of a Hollywood type thing. I think it just, consumer gives that a little bit more. So, we don't understand it as well. So we focus on B2B. And to answer the question, yes, that is a Patagonia Mentress Fund Vest. And you can't get them. They're sort of extinct now. Patagonia is refused to let anybody any VC at least put their stamp on it, because I think we abuse the privilege a lot.
Great. Just going through the list of questions in the chat. There's a question about the typical check size and investment stages. I mean, you're predominantly a seed stage focused fund, but do you do follow-on rounds with your investment companies? And do you help them sort of raise their subsequent rounds as well?
Sure. Yeah. So we are. You know, in fact, a bunch of our investments recently have been in and around sort of our existing portfolio and follow-ons. So our typical check size is 100K. The biggest check size is probably done is about 350. The smallest we'll do is we'll take early bets, quick bets on um, very early stage companies and do like 25 to 50K. Um, we absolutely reserve money for follow-ons. We like to do our pro rata. Sometimes we'll go above. It just depends on how the company is progressing. So that's been kind of the big thing for us, is to have enough allocation to follow on with our folks. And look, ultimately, our thesis is as Mentis Fund, trying to live up to our name, is to help and guide folks as they progress through their entrepreneurial journey. So one of the big things that we bring to the table is our connections and network in Silicon Valley and to investors. So we absolutely try to be, as helpful without sort of any sort of micromanagement. So it has to be much more of a pull than a push. So an entrepreneur comes to us and say, we're raising another round of funding. What's the strategy? What should we do? Here's our pipeline. And we'll, give them advice, and, whatever applies, they're happy to use. And then we'll give them, more important than advice, we'll give them connections and help with the transactions. We'll also give them sort of feedback on, if they're asking for fair valuation. Look, and when it comes to fundraising, right, you want this to be as friction free as possible, and you want to be as short of a phase in your entrepreneurial journey as possible, right? Some entrepreneurs, like me, circa.com, boom, we fall in love with fundraising, right? And we celebrate fundraising, and the whole tech crunch and this and venture beat, and you and I do a company that's making a few $1 million in revenue, nobody writes about it, and we raise 5 million and everybody writes about it, and that's completely wrong and ridiculous. So we tell our entrepreneurs that, if they listen to us, that fundraising is a necessary evil, right? All you should be doing as entrepreneurs, building stuff and selling stuff, and that's it, right? But then of course you have to stop and fundraise because you need the money for growth, for investments, and for marketing and all that fun stuff, right? So try to do it as friction free as possible, right? Go talk to the right folks, have the right message, ask for very fair valuation, ask for the amount of money that you need, not much more. If the times are good, then sure, you can ask for more, and you can be generous with how you value yourself. But we really try to guide them through that process, because we've made all the mistakes between the 50, 60 of us. There is no new mistake to be made. We've faltered, we've miscalculated stuff and all. So we try to pass that along, and the entrepreneurs have to make their own mistakes and learn, but hopefully they can get slightly fewer bruises if we are in their corner. So that's kind of how we do it. We absolutely do follow-ons. We try to help them with the fundraising and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Great. There's a sector-specific question around agri-tech, with agriculture being around 11% of the Pakistan GDP. Is that an area you're open to investing in? And if yes, what dimensions are sort of critical
No, absolutely.
success there?
Yeah. One of our first investments was Grow Guru here in California. And look, ag is, again, it's a traditional industry. So we love that, right? Like, so again, the beauty is, like, for an investor, if you're just talking typical, SaaS software, which, startup starts up and wants to sell to, tech giants in Silicon Valley. Well, there's, hundreds of thousands of others doing it, some doing it very well. And then, of course, that's what all the VCs here are interested in, right? Ag is a little less sexy. It's a little, out there. People don't know. There haven't been that many exits. And so there is that opportunity there, right? And that you will find these gems before the other big guys will find them, right? And the whole point of the venture world is to find gems before others find them. So yeah, no, I think we are interested in that. I will say that, certainly in Pakistan, I think there's a lot of potential. We've seen some really good plays also. in that, and they can be, all sorts of stuff. It can be very sort of heavy into ag, like, actual, sort of using machinery, using software, whatever. You can also be doing stuff in and around communication and learning and so on, right? You can, use AI, you can use, modern communication. There's just so much to do, because at some level it is an industry that, versus, for example, the financial industry, the vertical, right, has not embraced technology as much. So I think it's in some ways almost greenfield. So I think that, yeah, it's very interesting. I think what comes out of all of that is, okay, where are the exits? I mean, this is obviously a broader question for Pakistan, but who would acquire? Can you go public? How does the investor eventually get money back? Or are these more really good lifestyle businesses but not venture fundable businesses, right? So that's sort of the question to answer. But as a sector, it's actually very interesting. And the other question here for sort of the MENA region, look,
Yeah.
certainly the MENA region is very interesting to us, because I think there's a lot going on there. I think it should be of a lot of interest to Pakistani startups, right? So
Yeah.
you want to broaden your base, right? You want to go, you want to build stuff that can hopefully apply to, with changes and sort of adaptations to other markets around Pakistan. So South Asia and particularly Middle East. You also want to go to markets where there's more spending power, there's less dependency on sort of currency fluctuations, right? So if you're earning in euros and whatever reals and all, and if you're earning in dollars in particular, that revenue is very good. So I think that, yeah, you can start something where either you're focused on MENA or globally from the get-go, because it's a global product, or if you have something for Pakistan and you test it out really well, and then you go to other markets. So I think the MENA region is of interest to us, but I think it should be a very strong interest. It should be in the sort of your roadmap and strategy, your go-to-market strategy from the start. You don't have to go there from the start, but you have to think like that from the start. And most really, good successful companies there, obviously Kareem being a prime example, right? Like you have a very strong focus on the MENA region alongside Pakistan.
Great. There's this question around how you attracted the talent you've got at Folio 3. It's got a market reputation for having some of the best talent in Pakistan, and the work culture is quite a sort of a cult type story in the local market, in terms of how it draws the best people and is able to retain them in a fairly volatile talent market where people are hopping around quite a bit. So were you
Yeah.
intentional in terms of how you initially drew certain kinds of people to Folio 3?
No, look, I think the entire business, it's really interesting, right? Like, so Folio 3's entire business is people, right? I mean, that's basically it. We don't create a product. We don't have some cloud software. We don't have some Gen AI tool. We don't have a mobile game, right? We have all of that because we create all of that, right?
Yeah.
But our thing is people. But what's really interesting is, all entrepreneurs should understand their business is pretty much entirely people, right?
Yeah.
You might think that you're, I don't know, giving food at, your restaurant business, right? Or you're, creating apps. But ultimately it comes down to people, right? And I think the most important persuasion for any entrepreneur, right? So I think of entrepreneurs as persuaders, ethical persuaders. So you start by persuading yourself that there is a real problem, you have a solution or line of sight to a solution. So that's your persuasion. You don't do it by just talking and randomly, motivating yourself that I have to do this. You have to actually go out and see the data, talk to the customers, do all the stuff that is right to persuade yourself, yes, this makes sense. Then the most important persuasion circle is your people, right? So getting people to join you in that vision. And then, of course, other circles, advisors, investors, partners, customers, all of that. And these are all sort of, simultaneous orbits that you're trying to persuade. But the single most important persuasion, I think, is getting the right people to come join you and then persuading them to stay, right?
Yeah.
Because times will be tough, right? That I can guarantee everybody. If anybody thinks entrepreneurship is easy and they just look at the TechCrunch headline, you start something, 8 months later, you get acquired for $1 billion. Yeah, sure, it happened for Instagram and probably hasn't happened for anybody else. So, you want to, you understand, right? The most important persuasion, the most important part of your team, of your startup is your team.
Yeah.
So with Folio 3, it's doubly important, right? Because we actually don't even have, this product that we stand for. Folio 3 is just people, right? Yet the way we do it at Folio 3 is simple. We have something called the Folio 3 way, right? And that's, customers first, employees forever, and community as family, right? So those are our three pillars, right? So customer first does not mean, by the way, that the customer is right. All entrepreneurs should know that, right? Customers can usually be wrong. It's for up to you to persuade what's in their best interest, right? So customer first, absolutely, right? Employees forever is quite an interesting thing, right? It doesn't mean you have a sarkari naukri here, and if you're at Folio 3, you're done. But
Yeah.
what it means is, if you make that commitment to Folio 3, and you make that commitment to everybody at Folio 3, that you'll give your best, right? That you will not, slack off and therefore impact the people around you, right? That you see yourself responsible for Folio 3 success and the success of every person, and therefore every family that is associated with Folio 3, right? Then we make the commitment back, right? I mean, we have tried our best to keep this team together. We've never had sort of a reduction in force because of just financial considerations. We'd rather take pay cuts and do other austerity measures, right? So we've tried to be as stable as possible in that, and truly be sort of live up to employees forever. And that stable engine for growth is what I see Folio 3 as, right? You can have lots of unstable engines of growth, right? There's very much volatility. Suddenly you get this big round of
Yeah.
funding, suddenly you get this big project, and then you don't, right? And Folio 3 has been sort of steady because we wanted to do not just customers first, but also employees forever. And I think that has really helped us maintain. We do our best. I think there are a lot of also other amazing players in the tech services world, and that have, crafted that reputation of sincerity, honesty, and integrity. I think we've done that. And then the final thing, community is family. If you really, sort of look at the world around you and what impact you can have, Folio 3 has, considerable potential and firepower to make a difference in the society, and it exists, right? So all of us have a choice. All of you here, all of us in Pakistan have a choice. You can see yourself either as a product of society, right? And basically say, "Ji, hum kya kare, bas ye to society aisi hai," ya, yahan to koi waqt pe aata nahi hai, nobody's professional, to hum bhi usi tarah hai, right? So it's an easy choice. You can just say that, the lazy choice, we are a product of the society and we're done, right? Or you can say, no, we're here to shape society, right? And make it better in whatever way we can, whether it's through, professionalism, whether it's through investment, whether it's through philanthropy, right? And I think we always try at Folio 3, and I'm very proud of actually my folks at Folio 3, right? That they take this charge very seriously, that they are not just a helpless product of society, right? They are there to, in some shape or form, shape and improve society around them. So.
Great. A related question, but I guess more on the sort of business development side with Folio 3, like obviously you've, with a significant number of leaders for Folio 3 being based in the Valley, you get some instant credibility as the face for the business in the US. But going international with your sort of bulk of your team in Pakistan, have you encountered sort of perceptual challenges in terms of maybe, people talking about, the stability dimension of the Pakistani economy and the talent pool and this and that? So how any advice to other founders, early stage entrepreneurs who tend to, struggle with these kind of questions in terms of how do I sell Pakistan to an investor and to a customer on top of selling my business model?
Yes, well, that's a very good question, and it is exactly something that we have to do. Yeah, it's not, first, it is real, it's a challenge, but it's like most challenges, it's you're able to overcome it. One of the things you have to do is, I think, if you, whatever is in your control, if you can do that well, right? I think any customer, any client out there, UK, US, wherever, they're looking first and foremost, right? Not at what's happening in Pakistan's economy and politics and all, right? The first they're looking at is you, right? Whether it's Folio 3 or any other company, it's a startup, product company, whatever. They're like, okay, who are you? You are, the first line of credibility, and you are, the first sort of, sales pitch, right? Or proof of success, right? So you have to look at yourself, your team, and what you're giving, right? So stop worrying about everything else and just go there with that confidence, that quiet confidence in yourself, that, and also that sort of trust that the customer is looking for that, right? Like the customer is just looking for excuses not to work with you for whatever reason, because you're, Pakistani and or you're Muslim or whatever. There's not much you can do there. But the vast majority of customers, certainly in America, are actually very merit based and they're very fair. And if you give them what they need at a good fair price, and you give them in particular, yeah, it's not even so much about price or even the product, right? Obviously that has to all make sense. It's about the trust factor, right? Because most businesses, yeah, sure, something can go wrong here there, but will you be there through, thick and thin, as Folio 3 tries to be, by putting customer first, right? If you can convince them that you are bankable, right, that they can depend on you, right, that's the first and most important thing, right? So if you can do that, right, other things sort of fall away, right? Then you come to the second thing, which is, okay, you're in Pakistan and all, and look, if you're confident, right, of your identity, right, and of the value that, for example, Pakistan brings. So Pakistan is very valuable for Folio 3, right? Without Pakistan, we would not have the talent at the price, right, that we have, right? And we would be going to some other country, right? Or we would, fall in front of our competitors, right? So Pakistan is, well, if we first know that value, if we are just going to be bashing ourselves, yeah, Pakistan will go, "Achha hi nahi, sab kuch bakwas hai, ye wo, whatever," then how will you sell that to the customer, right? So without, just fudging stuff or lying stuff, look at honestly what it is, right? Pakistan actually has some really good universities. Yes, our education system could, you know, needs a lot of improvement, lots of investment. But right, the good folks that come out of there every year in all the cities, right? They are, ready to learn, right? And most of them, right, are genuinely committed and working hard, right? The older I get, the more I see that, IQ and genius accounts for very, small, few percent in your success, right? So it's the few extra hours a day that account for almost all your success, right? So if you get somebody who are folks who are committed, men and women who are coming out who are young, committed, and have learned some stuff, but are willing to learn more, right? That to me is a very sellable and group, right? And I sell that with pride. That look, this is why we are here. This is all this. I don't have to make big PowerPoints, which I've seen in the last 2 3 years. Oh, Pakistan's, 99% of Pakistan is under 20 years old. Okay, great, man. You're very young people. Okay, I feel bad. Okay, right, whatever, right? I feel old. But that's, you don't do that. You just say, like, this is why I'm doing this stuff. This is our result. This is our proof, and we're happy to be. So you don't hide from it, right? You don't change your name and this and all of that stuff. But if you can leverage what Pakistan has to offer, which is actually, a really, really big, strong talent pool, you should be able to say that to others who are focused on other things, right? Like, oh my God, here's the political stuff, or here's the economic stuff. You're like, the infrastructure is good, right? The network is good, right? People are good. Here's all our track record, and here's what we have to offer. I think you can overcome that, right? So it's obviously a deeper question on what else can be done and what the other challenges are. But at a high level, I think to avoid that question or to lie about that question is wrong, right? So I go in very proudly, right? That, I'm a product of that society, right? And I'm trying to shape that society back. And I have 900 other amazing folks, right, who are doing the same, right? And, we think we can do well for you.
Amazingly clear. And I think one of the members in the audience, they've talked about the clarity of thought and communication that sort of they've seen gleaned through the conversation so far. So how do you mentor your founders or students around achieving that clarity of thought? Is it just experience that, gradually helps you shape your mindset, or people, develop it differently through their life journey?
I think you develop most when you get, hit, you get some punches in the gut and you overcome that. Those are probably the best teachers, the tough teachers. Yeah, I think in anything you do, if you can try and stay away from vanity metrics and try to, find the true metrics, real metrics, and then be very honest with yourself that are you achieving those metrics, you and your team, or not. I think that's sort of where I see people falter. I will say that, I think as Charles Dickens said, right, all the swindlers in the world um, are nothing to the self swindler, right? So all the lies that we hear from the world are nothing to the lies that we tell ourselves, right? We so
Yeah.
desperately want to believe, right, that
Yeah.
our product, our company, our country, whatever is the best, right? And we
Yeah.
are so desperate that we will lie to ourselves, right? We will lie to ourselves that the problem is really, really big, right? Without looking out for more data on that, right? Or that your solution is just absolutely the best, right? So as long as you don't do that self-deception, and we've seen that across Silicon Valley, many of us have practiced it unwittingly, right? Hopefully, right? Otherwise, you're just an unethical persuader. But even as an ethical persuader, if you just not willing to, if you're deceiving yourself, you're going to just deceive folks out, right? You're going to focus on the vanity metrics. Oh, look at all the downloads for our apps. Like, who cares, yeah, how
Mm.
many downloads your app has, right? What's your DAU, right? What's your retention? Who's
Yeah.
coming back? Who loves it, right? Is it a must have, right? All of that stuff, if you can, really try, and this is very hard, right? It comes down to every facet, right? You'll deceive yourself that your team is the best, right? Like your friend
Yeah.
from college is happens to be the best CTO for you, right? I mean, all of these things, right? If you can try to, really be as brutally honest with yourself, look out to customers, look out to data, look out to advisors to tell you, and what really is going on. And if you can focus on true metrics, like I've focused my first startup on the biggest vanity metric, which was funding, right? So I raised 27 billion way back when from all the big guys, right? Never doing that again, right? Learned about liquidation preferences the hard way, learned about board control and egos the hard way, and you name
Mm.
it, I made all the mistakes, right? Um, and it came down to that, right? The true metrics are almost always going to be, right? Is the problem really substantial, and are your product service really solving that problem, right? And that's at the heart of it, right? And if you are, then you should have a lot of users. Hopefully you'll have lots of paying customers, right? And you'll have a growth trajectory. And you as founder CEO, your most important thing is to maintain that momentum, right? Because startups will die without momentum, right? If you're just like,
Yeah.
there's no customers coming in, or whatever, you're not making any progress on product, you're cutting the team down because your cash flow is an issue, there's no momentum, then you're not performing, right? You're as a founder CEO, right?
Great. I think just linking it to the next question we've got here, your favorite questions to ask to a startup founder or a potential senior management employee, like how do you gauge talent in a in a short conversation, whether they're bankable and
Yeah, yeah.
bettable?
Yeah, we try not to in a short conversation, right? So we try
Mm.
not to be forced into something very quickly. Certainly we work with partners. So we work, for example, here we'll work with a whole bunch of sort of funds and all, and we leverage their insights and diligence. In Pakistan we'll work with friends at Fatma Gobi and Sarmayakar, Eye to Eye,
Mm.
Indus, and Zen, with Faisal Aftab, and also, we leverage there, we listen to them. But I think in terms of gauging the team, you know, there are some things that are giveaway signs, right? If the founder CEO is not close enough to their business, right?
Mm.
Right? If we ask them something and they're rushing to their CTO to explain something, or we ask them something on sales and market, go to market, and they're rushing to their marketing person to explain, they don't have their numbers on their fingertips and all, those are signs that the CEO is not focused on the right thing, right? Like I said, you're building
Mm.
stuff, you're selling stuff, everything else is irrelevant. So if the CEO knows everything about safes and caps and investor conversations, but does not know, right, who their most recent customer was, or what are the biggest complaints coming from users, then that's a sign for us. The other is, again, what we are looking for here is somebody who has integrity and has powers of persuasion and can be a good leader, bring the best people together, right? So integrity will come into, like, if you ask somebody, okay, and there's a classic interview question, right? Like, what do you think is your biggest weakness? And your answer is, my biggest weakness is, I work too much hard, or I work too hard, and
Mm.
I care too much,
Yeah.
right? Well, then, come on.
Yeah.
So what keeps you up at night, right? you should genuinely say, okay, here's what keeps me up at night, right? Here's, I'm not worried about this, but I'm really worried about this, right?
Hmm.
And I think that level of, again, sincerity is what we're looking for. And then the persuasion, attract and retain the best, right? So, I mean, I think if you come into that, then other things come in, right? Your domain expertise, right? And all of that stuff, right? Very down low for us is, okay, have you raised money from big
Hmm.
names, or have you, sort of, you got your degree from a big university, right? Like that's very, very low down, right? The other parts are obviously much more important, right? Because ultimately, 6 to 12 months from the time that you're talking to us, everything will have changed, right? All the stuff that you're excited about is out of the door. You're trying something else. You're saying, should we pivot? Should we persevere? You have no idea, and you're applying through it. And that's the point, right? That if you're honest to yourself, right? If you're creative, and if you've been able to attract and retain through these tough times the best talent around you, you'll come out on the other side, right? If you don't, that's fine, right? But you have that shot, right? The probability is high in your case, and we're very happy to have bet on you.
Great. A bit of a change in mood. The foodie in me is tempted to ask, do you plan to bring Zareens to other cities in the US or overseas?
Yeah, I think we have 3 restaurants. We're actually thinking of fourth, and honestly, both Zareen and I would love our expansion plan to be to go from 3 to 1 and just relax. So I don't know what the future holds. It's been an incredible journey, right? I mean, so um, she's an IBA graduate, and she's actually an MBA. I'm not, right? So she's much better at business than I am. And she went through corporate America, and then she left all of that to be with the kids. 3 months later, she wanted to kill everyone. She was bored out of her mind at home, and she wanted to do more stuff. So she started giving cooking classes, right? And she and her family grew up initially in Buns Road, the greatest food street in the world.
Yeah.
And so this is way back when those cooking classes became this incredible hit, right? And then the best things there were the gola kebab and this and the chapli kebab and all. And so it was quite the lean startup methodology
Hmm.
in action, looking in hindsight, right? So she started the cooking classes, got the best things there. That then became this frozen kebab business where Zain and I were, sort of filling up our minivan and going, delivering stuff there, while I'm, of course, chairman for U3 and founder open and all, but I'm just, delivering kebabs with my wife, which was a nice, weekend date. And then, that became this office catering business. Actually, my good friend Arif Hilali was, at that time an entrepreneur, then went on to join Sequoia and now Bain. He was the first one said, look, you're doing all this stuff. Why don't you, sort of cater for my company, right? So that became office catering. And that then led to the very first restaurant, total hole in the wall, small restaurant right next to the Google campus, right? And so, she was profitable in her second month. She returned my entire investment in 8 months, and her year two revenues were 8x what I predicted. And across 100 Mentis fund companies, I have not gotten that sort of those statistics. So done very well. And actually, it literally is, just be really as close to the customer. If you have a great product, you're fine. If you don't have a great product, nothing will save you, right? And your product is your entire experience, right? Not just the gola kebab or the shirmal. It's the ambiance. It's most importantly the customer service and all of that stuff, right? So you try to do your best in all of that. Lots and lots of lessons. She is one of my case studies at Berkeley. But in terms of expansion, yeah, you know, there is an opportunity cost to everything, right? And there is investments and all to do. So in your 20s, and that's why at some level we like to bet on younger folks, because you don't know all the risks, right? You don't know the opportunity cost. You're just ramming through it, and we all love that, right? um,
Yeah.
but but yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. All expansion comes with some other things at issue. What I love is that we are able, because of this, to have an impact in the community around us here, have an impact through giving in other communities. We do a lot. Zareen does a lot for sort of women centric charities.
Right.
So yeah, an expansion would mean actually increasing that, and that is probably a bigger motivation to us now at our stage in life than just pure numbers. So we'll see.
Great. Well, being based in London, would love to see you open one here in London. I would say the desi food capital of the Western world.
Oh, absolutely. We love London. Like all of the restaurants, from like the real down home, sort of Lahore Kebab House to Dishoom and
Yeah.
Jikoni and everything else. Yeah, absolutely.
I was actually going to mention Dishoom that, maybe someday Zareen, can be the Pakistani
Yeah,
counter
yeah.
to
No,
Dishoom.
no, we
But
love this one, and particularly the overall package. I think the food is good, but I think
yeah,
the whole package and ambiance is actually great, right?
exactly.
But yeah, I mean, and again, there are lessons for folks. I think just getting that. Well, anyway, we can go down that path if you want. But yeah, we love the food scene in London. You guys are blessed. But I think what's interesting is to see the market trend, right? To see where the sort of not the where the hockey puck is now, but where it will be. I think the big cities in America are 5-10 years behind London. So you can sort of see
Yes.
that. And actually, the
Yeah.
food scene here, particularly the Pakistani food scene in the Bay Area, is phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
So Zareen is part of a handful of Pakistani restaurants that are doing well. And yeah, so I think and that's where the cookbook project actually comes from, right? Like there is a really incredible following and now an appreciation of Pakistani cuisine, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's great to see. I think the future is bright. Certainly not just for Zareen, but for all the other entrepreneurs coming into that business.
So pivoting back to sharing your learnings and experience on the lines of this cookbook idea, there was a question around, do you sort of have social media channels, any podcasts, anything that you sort of do on a regular basis beyond your Berkeley lectures to sort of
Yeah, yeah,
impart your learning and wisdom to the
yeah. I don't know about
broader
wisdom and all that
diaspora?
yet, but I don't know about. But yeah, look, it's interesting. I've been looking at this. So first of all, channels and communication platforms like this are incredibly good and important. For me to set everything up from scratch and do my own podcast, I've thought about it a lot. It wouldn't be me talking anyway. It would be folks I know.
Yeah.
But I haven't gone to that because I think um, you know if I can be part of these communities and these conversations, I think I can do a lot. Every time in Pakistan, I'm there at least a couple of times a year. I love to go out and talk at the incubators at universities and so on, or host events at Folio 3. So I think all of that is really good and important. I think beyond that, um, my course is now on edX, right? So now I'll try and maybe put a link in. And also, you can go find Entrepreneurship for All, UC Berkeley. It's free
Yeah.
for everybody. And I love that, right? Like, so we've gone from initially a class of 70, 80 people to now about 110 people with like a huge waiting list at Berkeley. But now because of edX, it's gone global, right? And that is amazing for us to see. Guess which is the number one country taking our course online?
India.
Yes. So number one country in India, and 55% are women. So which is amazing, right?
This is amazing. Yeah.
And then I think the second is US, but then the third is Uzbekistan for some reason, which is amazing. And I think Pakistan is fourth or fifth, which is also very good. So
Yeah.
that's amazing for me to think that or India or a
Yeah.
small town in Pakistan, some woman entrepreneur, would be entrepreneur, is taking exactly the same content and listening to the same guest speakers, right? Sal Khan of Khan Academy or Usman Rashid of Chegg or whoever, right?
Yeah.
As folks in Berkeley who are the ultimate privilege of the privilege, right? They made it to Silicon Valley, they made it to Berkeley, and they made it to entrepreneurship at Berkeley, right? But you don't have to do all of that, right? Because of Coursera and Udacity and edX.
Amazing. I think that's, for anyone looking to take this sort of insightful and learning orientated conversation forward, I think that's the logical next step for them. I guess we're 10 minutes from the buzzer, as they call it. So just shifting gears with another question around the startup space. So when do you know it's time to exit from the business that you've built over the years, like Clickmarks and Wordwalla? Like,
Yeah.
when did you know that now it's time to sort of pass the
Yeah,
torch
yeah,
on?
yeah, yeah, bilkul, yeah. And it's kind of it's a tough thing. I think with Clickmarks, honestly, what was really interesting was in the first incarnation when we had revenues, we had investment, we were doing much better than market, sort of other competitors and all. This is back in 2000, right? At that time I did not sell. We had lots of offers and all, and I wanted to take the journey out. In hindsight, right, I mean, we were getting this fantastic price and all of that stuff, everything was inflated and all. Would that have been a good call? Maybe not, because whoever buys us, then the dot-com bust happens, who knows, right? But it just didn't feel right. Like, I think we had momentum, we had a good team, we were doing the right things. I think that was the right decision not to sell at that time. But then, of course, thanks to that, I had like 5 years of hell, because the dot-com bust happened, and more importantly, the VC said, "Look, beta, you're a nice kid, 29 years old, whatever, and we need seasoned management." And we got seasoned management in. A year later, we had gone from 25 people to 80 people. We had offices in like 8 cities, producing exactly $0 in revenue, expensive salespeople going to expensive French restaurants, and all that fun stuff, right? And then you had to kind of take it back, because you could also do a fire sale at that time, right? And just get out of it, right? In fact, I remember thinking that, why had all of this happened to me, right? Like, maine to kuch nahi kharab kiya, I was a nice guy, I was doing well stuff, and this new guy comes in, blah, blah, right? And, the founder CEO gets no excuse for self-pity, right? So I was wallowing in this self-pity. I was in USA Today and New York Times, and ye kya ho gaya, main to kuch nahi, right? You can't do that, right? You're one of the founders, founder CTO, founder CEO, whatever. You just have to play the hand that's been given to you, right? And I remember this lesson coming very poignantly to me, because this was, late 2000, we were like on top of the world, and Q4 2001, it was like we're losing 3 million a quarter, and I was about to have to fire in Clickmarks, back in 2001, a bunch of folks, right? Or not me, but the CEO had decided that time, correctly so, that we had to let people go. And when you are in a startup, in a small company, these people are very close to you, right?
Close to you, yeah.
And till then it was all great stuff. I was having my photo shoots and all the venture beat bug and all, right? All the vanity metrics, right? And when we had to do that, that's sort of when I realized that I didn't have like 70, 80 people working for me, right? I was responsible for 80 families, right? And that's a very important lesson for all of us, right? So at Folio 3, it's not like the 800-900 people working for the CEO. We are responsible for 800-900 families, right? So any screw up you do, that gets magnified across all of that, right? So that was, a very tough time to go through, and some really tough lessons to go. But we had to go through, come out on the other side, and it took us 5 years to get to cash flow positive, right? And at that point, we could start to say, okay, we can actually now look for something that's reasonable. Because of liquidation preferences, I was not going to get much anyway, right? But can we then find a good, short for this and get something back for the investors? And the market decided to turn around. So then it was logical, and are you committed to kind of the next phase of growth or not, right? So I was in 99, 2000. I was in 2001, even after all the bad stuff happened, right? And then at some point it comes to you that, yeah, this is the right thing. But who knows, right? If I'd taken the offer in 99 and I got the big headlines and all, right? Maybe that was the right decision. Maybe it would have amounted nothing. It's hard to say. But look, ultimately you want returns for your employees and your investors, right? So you have to be very mindful of that. I don't think you should start a company with the thing, okay, if we do this right and we do these things, then these 3 companies can buy us, right? That's too narrow a play. And you don't want to start a company. You want to start a company to solve a problem and solve it really well, that customers love you, right? And then let things happen from there.
Great. There's a specific there's a lot of questions. I think it's going to be hard to catch up, but there's one specific one around.
Do you want me to go through these quickly, or how do you want to do this, right?
Yeah, I think let's if you want to scan and pick the one that
So I'll say, how did you stumble on Zareens? I stumbled on Zareen in grammar school. So I met my wife when I was 16, and that's how I stumbled on Zareen. I always knew she'd be up for a great business, so I invested in her by marrying her. No, I didn't. So, but yeah, we built it up together. She's the principal founder. I'm very much the CTO, the chief tasting officer, but I help her in moral support and whatever help I can give. But yeah, that's kind of how we made it a success is a whole different lecture. But I would still say very much that it comes down to having a great product and being very, very close to customers, knowing what they like, what they don't like, right? So I think there's some, wow, this is like going favorite questions to ask, companies you invested in. Downsize round, what does that mean for the startup world? I don't think it means much, right? Like if funds were raising 3 billion and they're raising 2 billion now, yeah, who cares, right? So I wouldn't worry too much about it as startup. Again, you shouldn't worry about those macro things too much, right? You got to worry about very much the ultra micro thing, right? Where is your next customer coming from? How are users talking about you, right? There are lots of companies that we invested in that didn't turn out well. One of the companies, I'm not going to take names, these are in the US, but interestingly, our Pakistani portfolio is actually doing quite well. Very surprising, but I think there's just so much resilience built into the entrepreneurs there that you just plow through. But one of the big things that happened is a founder, and I did this mistake too, that sometimes we give up and try to give up control to a more seasoned person. Whenever you're hiring somebody, especially in executive leadership, to either replace your CEO or to come be next to you in the leadership, you want to value competence over just a resume, right? So ये जी Google से आए हैं या IBM से आए हैं या Amazon से आए हैं या Habib Bank से आए हैं, whatever, does not matter, right? Do they have what it takes to thrive and work in a startup environment or not? So we had a company that they were doing 6 million in revenue year, and we got in at 11 million pre-money. It was like this greatest deal. We were like, okay, this is it, this is going to return Mentis fund, we'll all buy islands, we're done, right? And then the company was doing fine, and then good founder just decided, based on other investors on the board, that they have to get seasoned management in, and that just did not work out, right? And so there's always this lesson. First of all, yeah, 99% plus companies are not going to make it, right? But you want to give it the good old college try. You want to make the right decisions, and then things don't work out, they don't work out, right? So I think that's kind of the big lesson for all of this, for all of us. And certainly in the last couple of years, you had we haven't invested in some of the big fundraising ventures in Pakistan, but they've had spectacular failures as well there, right, alongside folks here in the US. And again, if you prioritize fundraising above all else, right, and you celebrate fundraising above all else, that's a pretty sure sign that you're not going to do well, right? So we try to do, but we've had our share of failures. I think our top quartile is doing actually quite well, which is what most VCs want, right?
Great. I guess there's a lot of new questions that have come up, but I guess this one around your sort of outlook for 2024, 25 in terms of where you see the tech investment ecosystem evolving over the next couple of years.
Sure. And I know we are at time at 10, but I'm happy to stay on. You can keep recording or stop recording. And if people want to stay on, I'm very happy to answer questions. It's entirely up to you. Obviously, Ali, I don't want to keep you because I think it's getting late at your end and obviously in Pakistan. But I'll talk about some of the stuff. 2024. So I'm an optimistic person. I'm an entrepreneur. So it goes without saying that you're optimistic. If you're a cynic, you cannot be an entrepreneur. But yeah, 2024, I'm optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic. I think, look, 2022, especially the first part of 2022, starting from like late 2020 to mid 2022, was like crazy good times, right? The pandemic, the world was suffering, the digital world just took off for obvious reasons, right? And then the party had to come to an end, and 2023 was the hangover, and there were many other things happening. Now I'm cautiously optimistic. I think you'll see stuff. There's layoffs happening here, there, whatever in the valley. But we did not do, most other investors did not do much investment in late 2022 and through the middle of 2023, and things have started to change and all. So there is money flowing back in startups. I think there are some very exciting trends. So there's lots of hype around generative AI, but there's lots of reality. And I think the hype to reality path of generative AI is going to be much shorter than other technologies. So I think that is going to be a driving force, as there is genuine use cases and adoption of AI, and particularly of generative AI. So I think
Yeah.
those are promising signs. You have to understand that, you know, VC funding is kind of a leading indicator of what's to come, right? So in summer of 2022 or early 2022, everybody was celebrating crazy stuff, and you know, everybody was hiring from Google to Folio 3 like crazy, and VCs had already started to slow down, right? We could see this is not making sense, right? And again, I'm not trying to be clairvoyant or so, but you know, you have enough conversations, right? You get a sense, right? So VC
Yeah.
started to slow down, the venture started to slow down well before, and then the layoffs came, right? And then other thing happened, right? And so now venture is picked up and it's leading, right? So then the other stuff
Yeah.
hopefully will follow soon. Whether it's 6 months or 12 months, you don't know, right? So I'm cautiously optimistic about that. I think certainly with the Pakistan scene, you know, people have asked about specific companies. I don't want to comment on companies, but yeah, the main thing is that, you know, secret well, Silicon Valley sort of has a get out of jail free card, right? Because we've created trillions of dollars of market cap, right?
Hmm.
When we do bad things, right, like waste money and go into hype and overvaluation cycles, you know, we get a slap on the wrist, you know, buri baat, naughty boys, naughty girls, right? And then suddenly 6 to 12 months later, the investors are back, okay, what do you have for us, right? Pakistan does not have a get out of jail free card, right?
Yeah.
Pakistan has not created trillions of dollars of value for investors, right? So I think we have to be very mindful of that, right? And you have to kind of say, okay, you know, this is what we have to do to prove ourselves slowly. There are no shortcuts here, right? There's no bling bling, right? It's all good hard work with you know, good rewards out there, right? So I think the cycle for things to come back to Pakistan and get that sort of investor confidence back and all will be a little longer, but it's already starting to move. You can see there's more funding happening. You know, the ecosystem is perfectly fine. And again, you got to look at Pakistan in sort of two different brackets. There's stuff that you and I can't do much about, right? The upcoming elections and other fun stuff, right?
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
stuff that we can do about, right? And that's what we have to focus on, right? So when you look at that, yeah, I think 2024 for the Silicon Valley ecosystem and for the Pakistan ecosystem is going to be a better year than 2023, in my opinion, right? So,
Great. I I guess I mean, there's still other questions people are asking. Are there ways to reach out to you
sure.
later on? I think um, I also feel a little unsatiated in terms of how much we could have
That's
benefited
always
from
good,
your
right?
yeah.
Uh,
So hopefully we can have you join us in another few weeks, months time to have a
sure.
follow-up session. But it's been a privilege facilitating this conversation. You know, I must say that as a member of this community, it's always inspiring when you get to talk to people who are relatable to you in terms of their backstory. You know, there's a lot of talk around youngsters being able to see people in the media, on the sports field, who somehow have a similar life story in
Mhm.
terms of their background. And I must say that, you know, successful Pakistani entrepreneurs in the valley, the world over, you know, it is always heartwarming and inspiring for all of us to see and engage with people like you. So thank you. There's a really interesting last one that I'd like to sort of cash in on, so to speak.
Mhm.
Any books you would recommend?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, Zareen's cookbook next year.
for
Um,
sure.
um, so I look. I think first of all, seriously, Ali, thank you. This was really a pleasure for me, and was really well moderated. And I've moderated a lot of sessions myself at Open and others, so I know it's a non-trivial thing to do well. So thank you. Yeah, I think you really hit it on the nail when you said, like, you know, for everybody watching and listening today, right? My journey is exactly their journey. You know, I was in Habib Public. I loved cricket. I was, good in math and not in much else. And, the journey starts from there, right? All the other like Gucci, Prada, Harvard, MIT brands are all bullshit. So please forget that, right? And, again, if I can do it or others can do it, that's what you have to follow, right? Like look at one guy, and I know he has a team around and all, but what Ali Fahad has done with this community, right? Like, look,
It's
I mean,
amazing.
he didn't have any special superpowers. Now we did discover he does, apparently. But like, think about it, right? Somebody who's
Yeah.
out there says, okay,
Yeah.
this is the vision. Here's a problem. I want a solution. Is there a solution out there? No, there isn't. And there is this splinter in my brain that I have to get this solution. Well, that's an entrepreneur, right? That's a startup. And then
Yep.
you go out and succeed. So all of us can do that, right? And I think you look for examples. They're certainly there in book forms. I like Phil Knight's Shoe Dog. There is, 0 to 1 is interesting. I always recommend Guy Kawasaki's The Art of the Start. It's a simple, easy read. It's a heavier thing, The Lean Startup, by Eric Race is actually a very good book, right? It's a little bit more academic. So there are lots of stuff there. But yeah, the best way to learn, obviously is by doing. But I think beyond that is by, colliding with and encountering other people, right? So, and take your example wherever, right? Whether it's in forming an entrepreneurial community online like Park Launch or starting a restaurant like Zareen's, the examples are all there. Don't get into kind of, okay, tech, software, startup, Silicon Valley book, right? Like there's great examples to learn from, right? Across, the world, right? So, but you have to go out and find them, right? Nobody's going to come and spoon feed you, right? So the fact that all of you, whoever is here right now on a Sunday night, right? Congratulations, right? You did it, right? This is how you go from success to success and eventually to significance.
Thank you so much once again for your generosity with your time and your wisdom. It was a pleasure hosting you. Have a good rest of your Sunday, and Allah Hafiz, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. Okay,
Cheers.
Bye. Cheers.
Bye.